when I was a Christian, I always used to kind of, you said arrogance, I always used to kind of find it slightly arrogant that it would be like, now people have to adopt a religion which has made a late introduction into human history. How did people relate with God prior to this coming in, which is the majority of human history? We've been without it, where that information's coming from.
Yeah, because these extraterrestrials visit them
and do
give
they
them the
still, is
information.
what I was going to ask. Are we still in contact? Are you, it's hard to take that literally, that a serpent spoke.
Yeah, exactly.
That, you know, a man came out the dust and a woman came out of his rib. Like,
right.
It's very fantastical.
Yeah, and this is what we're saying, that when you start to think like a god using science, it doesn't make sense.
The idea that a god inspired people to write what they call holy texts, you know, holy scriptures at any given point. Does God still continue to inspire people to write divine texts? My name's Jahaziel. I was a rapper, Christian rapper, or I define myself as a Christian for about 20 years. And then I started to kind of rethink some of my understandings or beliefs, you know, about God, who God was, the Bible, and you know, just the more I read and asked questions and just kind of thought critically about what I was reading, was the more the faith that I held kind of began to kind of just fall apart, really. And so yes, I started to redefine things, just basic things, just like, you know, who or what is God, and the Bible, you know, its history. I started to look at a lot of the Old Testament stories and stuff, and became, you know, more, I don't know if I say disappointed with the character of the God. Do you know what I'm saying? That you know, my belief about who God was being challenged by what I was reading, because I was like, you know, as a father myself, I'd think, you know, is that how a father would treat a child, you know, their offspring? And so, yeah, so it was a lot of different things. So then I started to just be more broad-minded and open-minded to other interpretations and explanations of, you know, creation and life after this life and all these kind of things. So, you know, I've seen a couple of your videos, and, you know, I've been impressed by just the kind of holistic kind of perspectives, you know, having reasonable and rational, at least thus far. I haven't asked you a lot of questions, but just on spirituality and life here on earth, really. How do we relate with God? Who are we in relation to God? So yeah, so a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, really. We're gonna have a good conversation. It's good to meet you for the first time. Yeah, you've said a lot. So my name is Seqen. I'm a student teacher of the master teacher, who you'll get to know a lot about throughout our conversation. And his name is Dr. Malachi Z.K. York. We affectionately refer to him as Pa Nabab Yaanuwn. And as a student teacher, our job is to teach people worldwide this outformation. And as you've just said, my journey was similar as well, in terms of before coming across Wu-Sabat and the master teacher, I grew up in a Christian household, but from a very early age, I just had questions as a child, you know, like, obviously you would go to church because your parents bring you to church, but I didn't really, it never resonated. And but as a child, I always had questions, like just looking around me, you know, nature, the stars, and just always pondering on what's really out there, you know. So yeah, I stopped going to church quite early on, and then, like you, I started to research and just researching various things and speaking to different people, listening to whoever was kind of like out there. At the time when I was becoming more awoke, it was really people like Farrakhan from the Nation of Islam, that I heard some of his tapes, recordings. And then I was aware of Islam because some of my brethren or my friends were into Islam, so I was listening to them. And it wasn't up until I first heard the tones or the voice of the master teacher, Panda Yaanuwn, that everything just clicked. It's like as soon as I heard his voice and what he was saying, it stopped me in my tracks. Like I literally stopped what I was doing. And I remember the exact words I said to myself. It was a recording that was playing. Back then we had cassettes, you know, the audio cassettes. And I stopped and I started to listen even more keenly. And I remember saying to myself, now that's one person on this planet who knows what they're talking about. Yeah, and from that moment, I read my first book from him. But even when I heard the recording, I didn't know who he was. I didn't know, but I assumed it might have been Farrakhan, but I just, because it was an American accent and I didn't know who he was, but the voice was so powerful and it was just like, stopped me in my tracks. I remember saying to myself, because all that time I was going inward to myself, asking questions, looking at nature, looking at the stars, wondering, you know, where am I from? Why are we here? So when I heard his voice and I said, now that's one person, I remember saying on the planet. I said, now this is one person on the planet who knows what they're talking about. And then I read my first book, which was called The Book of Names. And that was it. After that, I've basically just been on that journey ever since, reading more and more books, which just kept answering questions that I had, which nobody else could answer. Then I started to go to classes where other student teachers at the time, they were teaching, and I just used to study the scrolls and then go to class and ask them questions. I was a bit of a pest because I'm a very studious person. So when I studied something, if it didn't make sense, I would go to class with a book with questions and just continuously ask them questions to the point where I suppose some of those teachers must have been a bit irritated by me, but I never stopped. And then obviously grew in Wu-Sabat with the master teacher taking us through various schools, constantly answering questions. That's the one thing I remember with him, was that he would have an open forum for anybody to come and ask him questions, no matter who you were, from whatever walk of life, whatever school, religious school, scientists, it didn't matter, historians, anthropologists, and he was just reeling off information non-stop. And what I really found impressive with him was he knew all the languages of every scripture. He could literally quote any verse, any like Quran, Bible, you know, whatever scripture it was. And then obviously he was taking us backwards in time, and then like covered the Egyptology, the Sumerians. Then he always said he came from somewhere else. That was again amazing. Like I come from another planet. And he gave so much detail about this planet, and he explained in great detail who we were and what he was here to do, you know. And that's going back now. He was teaching from 1962 till today. So, you know, he's had longevity, he's proven himself. No one else has ever been able to really contend or stand against his, you know, his teachings. People have attacked him personally, but not the information.
Do you mind me asking, so where did he learn these languages?
Right, that's a really good question. So he knew them innately because of the being that he is, but he actually also studied at university. He went to the University of Khartoum in Egypt, and he studied, you know, languages as a linguist, and that's how he, you know, he got his degrees.
At a young age, must have been.
Yeah. So his mission began in his mission to the world really began when he was in his 20s, 25, I believe. But obviously, all his life, he was studying and being prepared for the mission.
And you said he said that he's from another planet.
Yeah.
Could you explain more to me?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, he explained. Okay, all right. Let me go back, because even himself, right? And this is where people can get a bit confused when we say he is a physical person, just like you and me, born from a mother and a father physically, but he has a being that has fully immersed himself in his being, known as Yaanuwn, right? So the physical person is known and named Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, based on his lineage from his parents. But this entity that is from the planet called Risk is the one that guides his pen and speaks through him and teaches him the information. And that being is one of the 24 elders known as Yaanuwn. He's the 19th elder. However, obviously as a young person growing up, he just it was different, but he was going about his life, and he was abducted, and beings came on a craft, and they stopped in Teaneck, if the way the Americans pronounce it, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, in New Jersey. And these three beings came out of the craft, and there were beings that were playing with him and around him all his life, but they came and he was afraid, obviously, because seeing extraterrestrials.
So Yaanuwn was a being, a physical being.
Malachi York is a physical being, but Yaanuwn, I'm coming to that because I want to clarify that. So they, these three beings, they were known Kriel, Alama, and Sa'at. All of what I'm saying to you, he's published in his books anyway, so you can read it. There's a book called Akasha Records that goes into details. Another one called A Man from Planet Risk, because as I said, that's the planet that he's from. Anyway, so they appeared and he was scared. They came up to him, touched him, told him not to be afraid. They told him they've been searching for him and looking for him because they were sent to the planet to find him. So they took him aboard the craft and took him, and showed him where he's from. They pulled up really big screens, like how we have like TV screens, but really big ones. And he attended meetings and with other, the Galactic Federation or beings from different galaxies, and he sat amongst them, and they started to explain to him and tell him who he was, where he was from, and that he's known as Yaanuwn. But obviously, he didn't really fully understand it at the time. So, from time to time, they'll come and check on him, visit him, but he didn't realize that the being will kind of take over like he was born and seeded with that being, just like you and me, right? You're here physically, but you have a spirit and you have a soul that is the real you, which is housed in this body. And so the separation between the physical being and the spiritual being is what I'm trying to explain to you. So Yaanuwn would be that spiritual being, but in our physical world, until you get to really know who you are, the real you, that is, like if you could step outside of your physical body, which is the skin suit, and manifest your real being, and that being is able to speak to you, it will literally show you that, you're separate. And this is what happens if you stare in the mirror, look at yourself in the mirror for a very long time, really study yourself, like your eyes, your features, your nose. And after a while, if you ask yourself, who's the real one? Is it the one looking out from the mirror or the one looking into the mirror? You'll get the sense of a separation. Because even when people say myself, they're separating them from what they're calling self. That's why you say myself. But to cut a long story short, as he grew up, went through his life, went to school, went to university, this being was becoming predominantly in control of his vessel, and then obviously started to write the books. And he explains within the books, because the being that is guiding the pen is saying things, and when he finishes the books, he will read the books himself, and he will be amazed, because that information is not from him, it's coming through him. And as an avatar as well, part of the mission was to set the record straight, meaning that he was spoken of coming by many cultures, many religions, many different schools or different people, even Christianity.
Who was spoken of, sorry?
This being coming.
Yaanuwn.
Yaanuwn, right? But he's referred to by many names by different cultures. So even in Christianity, he's referred to as the angel Michael, for example, right? So over time, people spoke about him coming. So in setting the record straight as an avatar, he was able to channel or be channeled to clear up every kind of like misinformation or confusion on the planet. So he would clear up the Bible, the Quran, you know, other books like the books of the Moorish Science Temple, like circles, Quran Circle 7. He will clear up all the lessons of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He just cleared up everything in setting the record straight, so that he will bring about this new time and era that we're in, which everybody's been waiting for and expecting this being to come. They just refer to him by different names throughout ages. So I hope that's given you a bit of a synopsis, and then we can obviously take any questions you have about anything.
Yeah. I mean, but even on that, like, I think that sounds to me, I mean, would possession be a right kind of term?
No, possession wouldn't be the right term, because in Christianity and religion, they teach about possessions, right? And possessions do exist. A possession is when an entity takes control of your vessel or your being without your permission. And they can do what they want with you.
Right.
Whereas in his case, he controls who can speak through him. Not anybody or any entity can take control of his vessel, because he's been designed specifically to do a job. And if anybody could do that, then it will be confusion. And in Christianity and Islam and religion, a lot of people do get possessed. And possessions are where, there are different types of possessions, but possessions are where you've got disembodied beings or spirits that are roaming the planet, that take over people's vessels without them knowing it or giving permission or having control over it, you see. So there's a big difference between a possession and being an avatar or someone who can channel.
Right. I mean, well, most holy books or writings, I know when I believed, Christianity, the Bible was written by people that were inspired in a similar kind of way that you're saying, that like God through them wrote text that wasn't necessary. Now, this is what I believed at the time. As I look at it now, I can kind of see a lot more of the human side of what's being written. So I can see in a certain, text that the writer may have had certain biases or beliefs, or, in some instances, maybe they were sexist, or maybe they were for a particular people, which I'm saying, the humanness.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like with Malachi York, is there not like, although Yaanuwn was writing through him and speaking through him, what about the human element of that? Is it,
right, that's the case. It's not a human. This is the difference. And like you say, when you look at religion and start to study it and study its origins and study who wrote the book and when they wrote the book and who was it for, and you start to go, what language was it written in? You start to pull it apart, because it's man-made and it's not infallible. So that's why you will find mistakes. That's why you will find things that don't make sense. That's why you will find that certain books were for certain people or certain cultures at certain times. In fact, when you do the studies and go back to let's find the original, right? Because like you say, in the books, they claim this is from a god, right? And then they tell you what a god is supposed to be. Someone who knows everything, who doesn't make mistakes, you see? And then when you start, like you were saying, when you start to analyze what the god is doing, he's making mistakes. He doesn't know everything. And that's why people get kind of disillusioned, because it's like, how can this God of this Bible or this deity of this book, whether it's Bible, Quran, etc., make so many mistakes? And even the way he thinks, you wouldn't think like that. And you're thinking on a higher level than him. I'll give you an example, like you were saying. As a father, if you have a son and there is trouble, you wouldn't send your son to go and take care of it.
Yeah.
You see? And to have him also then be abused and sacrificed and murdered, and you're just chilling, but you have the power to stop that. And that's just a very simple example. We can go from the cover of the book to the end and just pull it to pieces with mistakes. So yes, that's where when Malachi writes, or he puts out information, he literally tells you, like, scrutinize it, investigate it, pull it apart, try and find the mistake in this. And this is the thing that was very annoying to people in religions, because he was able to pull apart what they're calling infallible information from this deity. So you said in your introduction, like the questions you were asking, like, who is God? Where is God? Which God is responsible? Because we want to hold him accountable for things that are going on the planet. You know, the chaos, the murders, the rapes, do you know what I mean? The killings, etc. So who's responsible? So all of these questions are books that he wrote to answer the question, like, who is God? You know, who created the devil? You know, is there a devil? Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? Where are these places? And then he would dissect it according to the writings that people are saying come from God. But as I was saying last point, when you go backwards, you realize that these books are plagiarized from ancient tablets that existed way before they came on the scene. So on the planet, loosely, you'll have the black, the brown, the yellow, then you'll have the red and the white, in terms of if you were to classify like people loosely, yeah. So what you're having is the last two, which is the red and the white, which is dealing with the Arabs, the red, and then dealing with, you know, the Adamites when we're saying the whites, yeah. Then you go back to the black, that's again dealing with the Africans, or those who were here first. And for many years, it wasn't common knowledge, right, in terms of how did we all come about to be on the planet, to have different races, different colors, different, you know, different skin colors, different what people call hair types, different blood types. And it was confusing because most people were taught from a religious perspective, saying there was this being called God who created a man from taking the dust of the ground, forming this man, and then taking the rib from that man, forming the woman called Eve. And then they had children, Cain and Abel, and this is how life began or multiplied on the planet. Now, the problem with that, when you started to look at things from a scientific perspective, was that how did we end up with different colors, different skin types, different blood types, different, you know, so for many years, this was something people were trying to find out, until the Human Genome Project was carried out, which was looking into DNA, looking into genetics, and trying to see how things come about. And when that was done, the truth came out that everyone comes from the original African stock, even though, you know, they were classified like, okay, Negroid, Mongoloid, and Caucasoid in like the scientific world. It was like the original thinking that everybody came from the same two people, or one person, being the, you know, the woman, was not true. So they've now realized that there were three different strands, yeah? And so that's why I gave you that black, you know, brown, yellow, then it goes to the white, or to the reds, to the white. So now, scientifically, it's been proven that we don't all like come from one source. If we come from one source, but in terms of the different races, the DNA strands are different, you see. So that's like the latest information now, where we can now go into the detail of, okay, if people were here millions and millions of years ago, how are you following the last two races, which is the Arabs and the Adamites, with the Bible and with the Quran, which can be proven to be plagiarized from the cultures that came from way, way, way before. When you start to go into Egyptology and start to go into Sumerian texts and go into like Chinese, Hindu, the Zoroastrians, the Mayans, you know, there are other cultures that predate, you know, the Bible and the Quran.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's now becoming like, okay, they were genetically, the Adamites were genetically bred 6,000 years ago. They know this now as a fact, you know, because of the Genome Project and DNA analysis and just a lot of tablets and information that has been uncovered. And now people are waking up because all of a sudden, the questions that were mysterious are now being easily, you know, answered.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, easily in terms of someone who's willing to find the truth nowadays, because we're in the information age, you know, there are lots of, like before, when we were coming up, it would be like, you only literally knew what you were told at church. Or like, you know, you went to church, there was a, you know, a sermon, they read certain passages and it told you something and then that was it. Or you might go to Sunday school and again, they will teach you passages and, you know, like, it was all very fairy tale like, you know, because you couldn't connect to it. It just seemed like there's this God in a far place called heaven with angels there and you're here on earth and you have to die first to then be told whether you're going to go to this place called hell or this place called heaven. And until you die, you don't know anything more until we started to like probe and ask questions. Like you said, where is hell? Where is heaven? You know, where is God?
And these are all questions that you say are made clear and
very,
simple.
very clear and simple now. And I can answer any of those if you have those.
Well,
Yeah.
you mentioned creation, the Genesis story of the man coming out of the dust, woman coming out of his rib, so on. Like, I find it very difficult to obviously take those stories literally.
Yeah.
But you mentioned about with the genome and stuff. Like, is there an understanding of creation that I can get from the Genesis story that's not literal?
Yeah. So first of all, the first problem is being trapped in a book. Because if someone says, I want to know what happened or how did we come about, and they go to a book, that book, in this case, we're talking about the Bible, you have to analyze the book first of all, because the minute you're inside the book, it's like your whole world is in the book. You know, it's like you're watching a play and you're watching the puppets, but you don't know there's a puppet master behind. So first of all, we have to unravel, okay, who wrote the book? How did they know these things to put it in the book? And this is why I'm saying that when you start to do the research.
But sorry to interrupt you,
No,
but
go ahead.
wouldn't that be the same with the writings of Malachi? Wouldn't you hold the same questions or reservations to say that it's infallible, because technically it still comes from a person, although that person may have been channeled, there's still an element of humanism or humanity within that is there no room for
human error would be, in this case, more like typographic errors, maybe grammatical errors, but in terms of the facts of the information, there won't be no mistakes with that. And this is what I'm saying, like, before you knew that the Bible was a copy from, say, the Sumerian tablets, this is what I'm saying, that people who study will be able to go, okay, these books, like you're calling it Genesis, right? What does Genesis mean? And you're taught that Genesis means the beginning, the start of everything. But then if you go with that premise and you start to go, okay, if this is the beginning of everything, why is it saying in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? Somebody's talking, and that person is speaking in a third party sense, because if it was God speaking, he would say, in the beginning, I created the heavens and the earth, you see? And then, as I said, when you start to read from the cover all the way, you say Genesis doesn't mean the beginning. It's actually dealing with genetics. The first part of gen deals with genes and genetics, and it's the genetics of Isis. And we say, why Isis? It's because the stories in monotheistic religions are copied from ancient Egypt. So, and ancient Egypt predates the Bible. And within the Bible, what people are calling the Bible, first of all, what people are calling the Bible are a bunch of books that have been put together.
Absolutely.
Right? And somebody decided which books should go into that compilation. And, you know, but really...
So you're trusting those people?
Yeah, the Nicaea Council.
Yeah.
And then the part that some people actually accept is called the Torah. When you go into because the Jewish, you know, rabbis will only tell you that they only subscribe to the Torah, which they say were the 5 books that Moses received, right? So now you're saying, what are these 5 books? They tell you Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, Numbers, and Leviticus, right? And then when you find out, okay, the genealogy of Isis, Genesis, genes, genetics, okay, so who are these people? And when you end up in ancient Egypt, you find the story of Osiris, Isis, and Horus. These are the Greek rendition of their true names, because you have to also now address language. Because if you're reading it in English, you're like, what is God's language? Because English is only so old.
God has a language.
Right. Because if he doesn't have a language, and English is only like going back to like 525 AD, but yet the scientists tell you that the planet and people have been here for millions of years through excavations and through, you know, doing DNA testing, all kinds of ways to establish how old, you know, the fossils they find are. So, you know, like Lucy, you know, you can go back to fossils that have been found that go up to 7 million years old, right? So now you ask the learned people or the scholars in religion, how old is the Bible? How old is the beginning or religion? They will tell you 6,000 years old, which doesn't make any sense. When you got scientists telling you they found things that predate that. Even the pyramids in Egypt, which have writings and, you know, on the walls, and they still standing till this day. Even when they say they're like 10,500 years old, we know they're much, much older than that. But even then, it's like, okay, so if the pyramids are 10,000 years old, and you're telling me the Bible is 6,000 years old, so that means there's 4,000 years before this one, then you start to match the similarities between Osiris, Isis, and Horus, which become God, Mary, and Jesus.
Just to add to that, I did notice when I looked at the 10 Commandments, the similarities between the 10 Commandments and the 42 laws of Ma'at.
Right, you hit the nail on the head.
You know, Moses was obviously born and raised in Egypt.
There you go. That's what I was going to...
laws of Ma'at.
Yeah, exactly. So Moses is the one that is supposed to have received these 5 tablets. And he went up to a mountain, right? And he went up to a mount, according to their story, Mount Sinai, right? And then he saw God in a burning bush, he says, and he spoke with God in a burning bush. And then he comes down with these tablets. Now, when you research where that area is, the Sinai Peninsula is literally in Egypt, right? Near the north part of Egypt. And so you go and do the research in Egypt. Like you said, he was supposedly found and brought up in Egypt. But the real true story, when you go to Egypt, that you don't find anybody called Moses. You don't find, there's no evidence to prove that Moses existed in the way that the Bible is telling you. Because his name was Thotmuse, because he was a student of a being called Tahuti, right? And when he went up into the mountain, he saw Tahuti in ancient Egypt teaching students sitting down around him, and they had a light bulb, right? And you can find light bulbs drawings on the walls of ancient Egypt till today.
Yeah.
So that's, the light bulb was where they were using as you know, light. And he saw that and he didn't know what to call it. So he interpreted it as a burning bush. So all these little stories and these things that are confusing in the Bible, like I'm saying, we can start to clear them up when you know where the original source of information is coming from. You see, that's why I'm saying, like, if you start to use your common sense, how can God be a burning bush? First of all, for something to be burning, it needs to consume something, yeah? Oxygen, it's got to be there, and there's some kind of substance that is, you know, being burnt. So it wasn't a burning bush. So he comes back down, but he actually asked Tahuti to give him a portion of what he was teaching and they were studying. And those are the writings that became what they're calling the 5 books of Moses. And as you say, you look at what they're calling 10 commandments, there were actually 613 commandments. And as you say, you see how they match up with, as you said, the you know, the writings of, you know, the negative confessions and so on. So that's just one aspect of that story. So then you're like, okay, then you carry on reading in Genesis. The word in the Hebrew is not even Genesis, it's barashith, yeah? Because again, the language, because you're reading English, you're going to be told whatever whoever is telling you in English is, and as I said, English is not that old. In fact, it's not even a language, it's a dialect that's borrowed from other languages, you know, from Yiddish, from German, from French. Again, you have to study languages. And
so
yeah, no, anytime you're ready to
interrupt.
interrupt
Because you
me.
said earlier,
Yeah.
God has a language.
No, I was asking the question.
Oh, okay.
My question was, or the master teacher asked the question, what is God's language?
Right.
Because if you're saying God was here first, at the beginning, but then there were languages way before we get to English, because English is a translation. Even if you just go to what they're calling Hebrew, this is what I was going to when I'm saying Barashith, because that's the Hebrew word for the word Genesis. And then you start to read it, you're like, okay, we're reading English, but it says in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So you're like, who is God? What does God mean? Because it's English, right? So you go to the Hebrew to see what God is saying in the language that it's being taken from. And the word there is Elohim, which is a plural. It's not one singular. You see, this is what I'm saying about how the confusion, let us make man in our image and our likeness. So now you start to ask, who is the our? Why is it plural? When in English it's all being translated as singular. God, 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 all the way through. Not only that, but in the Hebrew, wherever they're translating as God, in the Hebrew is not always the same word. It's like, as I said, Elohim, it's Adonai, it's Hashem, it's Hakim, Yahweh, you know, Jehovah, as they translate the Yahuwah into. So you start to see that there are many mistakes from the language that it's been translated from into the English, and when you study that, and it starts to make more sense and you get clarity when you're putting things in the right places, in the right order, using the right language, and deciphering what was taking place at that particular moment, or where they got the story from. Yeah.
So something that I've always wondered is just the idea that a God inspired people to write what they call holy texts, you know, holy scriptures at any given point. Does God still continue to inspire people to write divine texts?
Again, we have to establish who is God? When we say, does God inspire people? And which God? Because like we've just established, Elohim is a plural. So there were many gods, right? And yes, to answer your question in the sense that the gods of the Bible are extraterrestrial beings, yeah, that come from different places, different constellations. And some of them, you know, came before others. Some went to different places and they taught people. And this is where the confusion comes in, because when you're reading in Genesis, for example, and he's telling you about what God is doing, and he's walking and he's talking and he's telling Adam and Eve what they can and what they can't do, you can literally now see that this entity is a being that is walking, talking, has attributes of a man.
Yes.
But obviously with a religious mindset, when you're growing up, and it's made, remember at that time, nobody was talking about extraterrestrials. Nobody was talking about where heaven is. They just explain heaven as being up there. And, you know, as a child, you just think it's some mystical place, because when you look up, you're like, up there where? But in the Bible itself, it actually tells you where up there is. You know, it gives the places by name. Like if you read Job 9:9, Amos 5:8, you know, many quotes that are explaining where heaven is, and the names are given, like Orion, you know, Sirius, Pleiades, Arcturus, other constellations. Yeah, because again, now you've just touched on the word planet. If you look at the word planet, you're literally looking at plan, ET, which is an extraterrestrial plan, because these extraterrestrials are the ones that they had a plan to come here and play God and control people, pass themselves off as gods. But when you start to look at how they're behaving, like you said, they have emotions. Like it says, it grieved God for creating man. And he says, I'm a jealous God, have no other gods but me. And then you're like, who are these other gods that I can have? Why are you jealous? How can you be jealous of your creation? How, you know, these questions that you start to ask just make you think, nah, this is not the almighty, all wise, all right and exact, that knows everything, can do anything, can go let there be light, and things just happen magically. Because when you start to put him to the test, all of a sudden he can't do the things that people in religion are claiming he can do. Like, why doesn't he just say, let all the sin be gone from the world, let all the chaos be gone, let all the, you know what I mean, the diseases and all the famine and all the problems on the world, why can't you just get rid of them? Because we're talking about these extraterrestrials that come from different places, different beginnings. Because when you say a planet, in our solar system, we have more planets. We just are preoccupied with the planet Earth because we're here. But there are other planets, and that's just in our solar system, not even in the galaxy or the universe.
Well, you mentioned earlier the Galactic Federation.
Yes.
You said. Could you explain more of what that I mean, I think I understand what you're saying. That is, it's species from different.
Yeah, it's like now on the planet, you would have different sovereign states. You know, like Russia, you'll have China, you know, Africa, America, and before there was peace in the way it is now, there would be several wars. Anybody could just attack anyone and do anything if they had more power. And after World War One and Two, they had to put together what they call a United Nations, where different people from different nations come together and they can, you know, represent their nations, but there's certain laws and certain jurisdictions that are put in place to make sure that we all have a vested interest in the planet. So if you're going to use nuclear weapon, you know, the international community can be like, you know, that might destroy all of us. So let's govern things in a particular way. So in that same token is the way the different galaxies that have been fighting and having wars also came together to be like, okay, we'll have a galactical federation, because you're dealing with galaxies now instead of, you know, like countries on this planet. So they come together because there are many galaxies. And as I explained at the beginning, when the master teacher, Parnabab Yaanuwn, Dr. Malachi Z. said to us he was from a planet, he didn't just say I'm from a planet called Risk. He said I'm from that planet is in a galaxy called Ilion, which is known as the 19th galaxy. And then he taught us that we're in the 18th galaxy, which, you know, referred to as the Milky Way. And there are other galaxies. So when you're an intelligent being, because remember, he was taken and taught and shown these different galaxies and the different beings, and he was told what his job was going to be. So he's able to teach us universal information and knowledge. And other beings who have been on the planet that have been abducted by other, you know, beings from different places, they also teach similar information. Now, why it's important is because if man with limited information, with like atomic weapon, like what happened with Nagasaki and Hiroshima when, you know, during the wars, that almost literally destroyed the whole planet. And when a planet is destroyed, it can have a kind of like a domino effect where other planets can get pulled into the sun. And then if the 18th galaxy is destroyed, it will have an effect on the 19th galaxy, where he comes from. So a lot of these intelligent beings on the galactical level, they're not just concerned with our planet, they're concerned with the galaxies and concerned with the universe and how things have an effect on other beings. So it's in their interest, and a lot of them live here as well. A lot of them have actually been here from the beginning of the planet, like living in the seas, living, you know, in the skies, living amongst us, living in the caverns of the earth, living in the, you know, deep jungles. But they had an agreement to be inconspicuous and basically like coexist without creating any problems. But then some of these laws were broken and other beings came and other entities come and they caused chaos, and now it's getting to a point where a lot of disclosure is taking place because things are really getting out of hand. But the point I was making is that the Galactic Federation, they make movies like Guardians of the Galaxy. They tell you things in movies like Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, Star Wars, and a lot of these stories, although they passed off as being entertainment, they have, you know, truth. The foundation is really based on truth, although they may add the entertainment elements to it through Hollywood and so on and so forth. So what you have is intelligent beings that try to make sure and keep peace throughout the universe, throughout the galaxies.
And so it's the idea that they're there to keep peace, that would mean to say that there are some galaxies that are agreeable and some
that are disagreeable. But not so much the galaxies, but the beings.
Beings, right.
Yeah, because just like we are on the planet now, you have, and that's a really good point, because some of these beings that came here passing themselves off as gods, you know, the Anunnaki is one of the ones that a lot of people know about and they're talking about now, because as we've been getting more and more information about the origins of the Bible and tracing it back to the Sumerian tablets, you know, the Gilgamesh epic, the Enuma Elish, Atrahasis, and many of the Akkadian tablets that have been uncovered, the stories are now clearer how things started. And now people are like, okay, so these Anunnaki came here and they were the ones that, you know, created man, but they don't know about beings that came before the Anunnaki, like the Panatharu, yeah, who are really the Negroids' ancestors originally before they seeded this planet. And so they're now like, okay, Anunnaki, you had Anu, who is the most high or title, like here in the UK, we might have like the prime minister as the head of, do you know what I mean? Like the country, or the, you know, the king and the queen. And in America, they will have like presidents. In other countries, they have kings and so on. So the highest title amongst the Anunnaki is known as Anu, which is the Most High. And this being in the Bible is translated as the Most High, because that's what Anu means, the highest. And so these tablets, like the Enuma Elish, which is really where the Bible comes from, it starts off when on high.
The Enuma Elish.
Yeah, when on high, meaning that when they came here, what took place was Anu's sons, you know, the two main sons are Enlil and Enki. He has other children and they have families, you know, like Nagal, Arishkigal, Ninti, many of them. But the two that most people know about is Enki, because Enki and Enlil. Enki was terraforming the planet, because the planet itself has been here for billions of years, right? And it has had accidents and, you know, catastrophes in certain parts and areas. It's changed its size. So one of these incidences was when, you know, like, there are many incidences, like 450,000 years ago, 2 million and 250,000 years ago. Even before that, like, meteorites will hit the planet. And on this particular situation, the meteorite that hit the planet caused a dust cloud to cover the planet, and to the point where the sun rays weren't coming through anymore. So the planet, this is where you pick up that story in Genesis where it says it was dark and void and darkness on the earth, and they're telling you that God said this, God said that, right? And it's because Enki's craft came and it was hovering above the planet. And what he was doing was that he asked, because they came from a big ship called Nibiru, right, which is a big planetoid ship, bigger than the size of the planet. And when we say that, because of the dumbing down of people, they look at that like, no way is a craft or a planetoid ship bigger than this planet. But when you're dealing with beings that have advanced so far ahead in terms of, like, they're like 100 million light years advanced. So they build planets, they build what people are calling like moons and stars and galaxies, and do you know what I mean? Like, they do that. So in this particular instance, Enki was asking for Nibiru to shine light to clear the dust cloud, so that the sun rays will penetrate and come back, so that life can start again. And he was the one that, he said, when they said, let there be light, like they're saying, God said, let there be light. That's Enki doing that work, saying to Nibiru, shine light to melt and get rid of the dust cloud, let light through again from the sun, so that life can start to grow again. And then he had to do things like bring insects and plants and certain things from other planets, like exported them into the planet. And this is why a lot of people have allergies and they don't even know why. It's because some of these things are not from this planet. So what I'm basically saying is, when you start to look at these stories from the truth of what's really taking place and where they come from, that these extraterrestrials are the ones that have come to the planet and they're doing things, and primitive man that was evolving, because as I mentioned before, you had the Natharu, who Malachi or Yaanuwn is one of, right? They were the first to come here, and they were the first.
Sorry, did you call them the
Natharu?
Natharu.
Yeah, and in Egypt it becomes Natiru.
Nice.
And that word Natiru becomes nature, because if you know anything about the Egyptians, they respected nature. You know, they gave reverence to the sun, because they understood that the sun was responsible for life, for crops and pretty much everything on the planet, which is S-U-N. And when they copied the stories over into like the religion and trying to like spellbound people, the S-U-N became a S-O-N. You see, now when you start to tie the stories, you kind of see how they align perfectly. So yeah, they were like, the Natharu came millions and millions of years and they seeded the planet, and then like life was just flourishing before an accident took place with Nibiru, which hit Meldek, which was another planet. And this planet at the time was known as Tamat. And through that accident, it bumped into Tiamat, split it in half. This is what the asteroid belt that you see. If you study our solar system, you know about the asteroid belt. And because of that, they found that gold was here, because this was something they were looking for, to go back and repair their planet, because, you know, that had another story and another accident before, or there was wars and
So gold is
destruction.
exclusive to this planet?
It's not exclusive to this planet, but they were traversing the universe trying to find it, and they didn't know that it was here, but through the accident they kind of like bumped into it. So they decided to set up shop here, and this is where, when you read the tablets, like the enumeration, they tell you that they called it Iridu, right? They named the planet Iridu, where you get the word Earth kind of comes from that, Iridu, which became Irith and Ard, and then that became Earth. And before, as I said, it was called Tiamat at one point. It's had many, many names, yeah? Gaia was another name. So they decided to set up shop, call it a home away from home, Iridu, and then mine the gold. But they were mining the gold, and the work was very difficult for them because the atmosphere was completely different to where they come from. And they did this for like thousands of years, and then the workers, they were complaining that this is too much hard work. And so they decided to revolt, and then Enki decided to create a worker to do the work instead. And this is the worker was known as Alulu Amilu, which means primitive worker. So what they had to do was take the beings that were already evolving on the planet from the original Natharu seed, known as the Pataites, or they call them pygmies. They put their DNA and their genes with them, and they did a lot of experiments. It wasn't just overnight, and they created this being to mine.
So there were
gold.
beings on Earth,
Yeah,
prior,
yeah,
and
prior
then
to
and
that.
you're saying they genetically modified them.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. But when we say beings, this is another thing with humanoids or human beings on the planet. We only think about ourselves, but there were beings in the waters for millions and millions of years, evolving different types of beings, you know, on the planet at the time, before even the Natharu seeded this planet with their DNA, and then life evolved from the waters, from their DNA onto land. Okay. And they
Are
did
there
that.
still those beings in the waters?
There's still beings in the water till today. And we are those beings as well. We've evolved from the waters. And this is why water is so important. When every time anyone is looking for life on another planet or anywhere, the first thing they have to do is look to see if there's water. So we still drink water. We bathe in water every day. We're breathing in water. We're born out of water. You are more percent, I think 70-something percent water. The planet is more water than it is Earth, even though it's called Earth. The water part is more. So we're breathing water. We're in biospheres. It's just different, you know, levels of water in terms of the density. So yes, a lot of different beings, even insects, like, have been here for millions of years, bacterias, and humans, because of their arrogance and, you know, they just think they're the most important. You know, you have, like I said, bees that were brought here. You have many insects that, you know, mantis, and loads of beings that are here coexisting, getting on with ants. Do you know what I mean? Like, you think an ant is small, but you can use, you know, microscopes and look at things that are smaller than ants, you know. So it's a, you know, it's a bit of, as I said, man's arrogance to think that, not only that on the planet itself, but they think we're the only life form in the boundless universes and the cosmos. It's just like, that's ridiculous. So yeah, so there were beings here way before. Sirens that still live in the water, which people now are finding, calling them mermaids. Because what happened is, for beings to come onto land from water, when these accidents would happen, like meteorites will hit or tsunamis will take place, beings will get thrown onto land. Some of them so far that they can't make it back to the water, so they just decide to adapt and then evolve and live on land, you know. And if you go back to, like I said, ancient Egypt, where the monotheistic religions are taken from, that's why Abraham is going to Egypt. Jesus went to Egypt. Joseph and his family were in Egypt. Abraham, Moses, everyone's going to Egypt. The reason for that is because to make the Bible seem authentic and believable, they had to tie in Egypt to it, because Egypt's a real place that you can go and visit. And so, you know, when you're reading those stories, you know, you hear words like Cush, Ham, which comes from Ham, which is Kemet. You can literally tie Noah, you know, in Egypt he's known as Senefiru. In the Sumerian he's known as Utnapishtim. So what I'm saying is, when you start to look at the original stories, how they got plagiarized into, you know, what we're calling the Bible and the Quran today, which are literally, in terms of time, they're literally like minute, because Islam's what, 1400 years old? The New Testament, they say, is around 2000 years old. The Old Testament is 4000 years old. So now you go back to people that were here living, had a whole culture, civilization, were living their life, had their own writings. You know, like I've mentioned many times, the Hindus, the Chinese, the, you know, Mayans, the Sumerians, the Egyptians.
Yeah.
They had a whole system,
Yeah.
writings and everything. And they tell you their stories of how they came to be and where they came from and who are their gods, and where, you know, then you start to see.
I mean, when I was a Christian, I always used to kind of, you said arrogance, I always used to kind of find it slightly arrogant that, you know, it would be like, now people have to adopt a religion which is made a late introduction into human history. Do you know what I'm saying? How did people relate with God prior
Exactly.
to this coming in, which is the majority of human history? We've been without it. And the common sense is, even the writers of the Bible didn't have a Bible.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And chose which ones to put in that book. And there's so many books that are not included.
Yeah.
Like you say, then you start to hear the story of the disagreeable beings, like Enlil, who is a son of Anu, and his son, you know, being Nana, who is the disagreeable being that in religion...
Whose son, sorry?
Enlil.
Enlil's son.
Yeah,
Right.
his son is named Nana.
And where can I learn more about the Enlil and Enki?
Yeah, we've got loads of books. I mean, we've put out videos as well, but we've got books here that you can learn more about.
Cool.
We did a whole one called the Anunnaki recently as well, which talks about the Anunnaki. But my point is that what's happened is the disagreeable beings for the last 6,000 years were actually given dominion over the planet. And
By who? Who were they given dominion?
right, so this is what I'm saying, when you start to deal with Intergalactic Federation and the beings that own planets and things like that. You know, like here you will own real estate, like you have land, and then you will have a house, and you can, you know, rent it to somebody, or somebody can get a mortgage, and, or, you know, they can lease the land. This is what happens when we're dealing with planets. So the custodians were given, you know, time, let's say leasing it for 6,000 years. They were told, okay, we're going to give you dominion, and in that 6,000 years, we're going to monitor you and see how you treat everyone and how you deal with managing this planet.
It reminds me of Job, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. And in that 6,000 years, what they have done is literally use religion to dumbfound people, control people, abuse people. And, you know, it was like, okay, but your time is up now. Their time was up in the year 2000 AD. This is the Adamites, yeah? This is why it says in the Bible, whatever Adam named a thing, that's what it became. So they named everything. They basically gave you all of these books like, you know, Bible, Quran and all that, and they worship the person I mentioned called Nana, who in the Bible gets made to be like a good guy, yeah, because everything's turned back to front. So he's really the when you hear about the anointed cherub. Now, in religion, everyone says, "Oh, that's Jesus," but no, they're talking about this character, and he's the one that is pretty much responsible for the chaos on the planet. Obviously, he has his minions.
He's been given.
Well, he was given, that ended in the year 2000. That's why when we say 6,000 years, we're talking about, if you're counting backwards from 2000 AD, yeah, like I said, like if you add the 2,000 year of Christianity plus the 4,000 years of what people are calling the Old Testament, that gives you 6,000 years. And that is it's also a moon cycle, because with nature, things happen in cycles. Just like you'll have winter, then you'll have summer, So you have moon cycles, sun cycles, and that's just dealing with, our planet and our solar system. But then outside of that, when you're dealing with the galaxies, you have, like other cycles. Yeah, so everything's a cycle. So like, time is a cycle. Like, every 60 seconds, the 60 seconds just keep going in a cycle. The minutes are cycles. Then the days are cycles. The weeks are cycles. The months are cycles. And it goes on the way to when you get into like large time frames where you will say 24,000 years, it's an equinox. Because remember that we're judging time by the planet going around the sun. One rotation gives you, they say,
a year.
1 year. But if you did 24,000, that's an equinox. You did another 24,000, that's nearly 50,000. They say an epoch. And, you'll have like a jubilee, and, there's so many terms used to tell you how far to go back in time. So what happened is that we are now we end the end of the 24,000 cycle, and a new one is starting. This is why even in the Bible, people are confused, because when he says God created things every day, and then he was done with creation in the 6th day, and he rested on the 7th day, which became the Sabbath, because it tells you that one day unto the Lord is like 1,000 years. So if you're using 1,000 years, if you're using God's time, so 7 days are really, you have to use 1,000, so it'll be 7,000, for 1 week. So a day, so 7 times 7 gives you 49,000, if that's making sense. And then, so the time that we're using and the time of these beings, these extraterrestrial beings, is completely different, because they're not in our time belt. They're not on our planet being governed by that rotation of the planet going around the sun to give us our time. They're outside of that. So yeah, their time belts are completely different.
Okay, something I want to ask is this communication between, I say humans, us, and extraterrestrials. You've referred to how that's happened, and would that explain, I guess, like I mean, in the pyramids and stuff, and the advancement of civilization with the Egyptians, things like the Dogons that had, writings of the whole constellation with no telescopes.
Yep, exactly.
Is that where that information's coming from?
Yeah, because these extraterrestrials visit them
and do
give
they
them
still,
the
is what I was going to ask. Are we still in contact? Are you,
Yes, you're an extraterrestrial.
Okay.
We all are extraterrestrials. If you go in by what the word means. You see, this is why I always have to go back to the language, because this is why Yaanuwn, Dr. Malachi Z. York studied languages, because the confusion comes with you speaking a foreign language that's been given to you. And these, like I said, planet ET, or this planet, the beings that had the dominion in the last 6,000 years, they went around the planet, the whole world, making sure that English is the most widely spoken language, right? So when you're saying extraterrestrial, the word extra is addition to, or something to add. When you're saying terrestrial, you're saying the terrain or the planet was known as Terra at one point, right? So you're saying something that's outside of the planet is celestial, yeah? And something that's inside the planet is terrestrial. So you say something from outside coming here is an extraterrestrial. So that means that if you're saying God blew into you and you became a living soul, then that part of you that you're calling God is not from here, because God is not from here, right? Because God is supposed to be in heaven, right? So the view of what people say when they think of the word extraterrestrial, because of the movies, they've made extraterrestrials into aliens.
Aliens, yeah.
And then they give you depictions of aliens, which are different types of extraterrestrial beings that look differently, but they make them look like what they will call ugly, grotesque, or they're going to come to harm you. So your mental perception of what an ET is, they even made a movie, ET, Go Home, if you remember, go back in the days and watch the movie, and it's like there are positive or agreeable extraterrestrials and there are disagreeable or negative extraterrestrials. Just like on the planet there are agreeable people and there are disagreeable people in every race, in every color, you know what I mean? So when you're saying extraterrestrial, you have to remember that we are extraterrestrials as well.
Is the disagreeable and agreeable nature,
Yeah.
is that part of their nature, or an individual choice to be, you
Right,
know,
it's a good question, because there are so many different types, and there are extraterrestrials that are like robotoids, or they have no soul, no emotions. They were made just like now, you know, on the planet, people are making robots now and putting AI into
I was going to ask
them.
about AI.
Right,
I was going to get
right.
there,
So
yeah.
AI is actually from extraterrestrials, because one of the things that they're tired of humanoids and humans and their egotistical and arrogant nature destroying the planet with doing, you know, dumb things. Some of the extraterrestrials want the planet for themselves. They think it's theirs. They've been here for much longer than us. They think we're not very intelligent with the things we do. But other extraterrestrials are responsible for that by dumbing us down, by, you know, making things that we think are cool or good, when they're not. They're actually bad for us. Like, they stopped us using our brains when they introduced things like calculators and, you know, computers. And we think, oh, we can just use a machine to add up and stuff. So we stopped training our minds and our brains. Yeah. So to answer your question, there are so many species of extraterrestrials. Not all humanoid, not all agreeable, like the greys, which a lot of people talk about, that abduct people. The original ones were known as Rumadians, right? And they were like, you know, like a drone. Like now you've got drones, right? But the drones, like robots, are also evolving, because the first, you know, version of robots couldn't probably move. Now you see how the robots are moving. They're getting more and more agile in terms of their movement. And now with artificial intelligence, or AI, they're very smart. And the reason they're so smart is because, again, technology is part of, you know, how they've managed to control us, because everybody looks at technology like a great thing, because we've got smartphones now. We can do so many different things. And the more technology that is given to us, the dumber we are, because we now become reliant on the technology. So much so that now the biggest fear from technologists such as myself is that AI is going to take over and AI is going to just like ruin us, right? They show you this in movies like Terminator and so on and so forth, because these beings are so advanced that, you know, they give us some technology at a certain point, but we've got to a point where we have to evolve so that we can become a part of the intergalactical community. And where we were hidden from these extraterrestrials, where a lot of information was hidden from us, and only certain privileged people were, like, you know, in the higher echelon of society, were allowed to know certain information. You know, people make fun of things like Area 51 and, you know, the government knowing about, you know, crashes like the Roswell, many things. The Dogons, as you mentioned, talking about Sirius C before they had advanced telescopes. But we're moving now in terms of technology to the point where we are being upgraded. So like we have telescopes now like the James Webb telescope, which can look further back into the universe to see where we came from. Before that, obviously you had the Hubble telescope, and now you have many people that have been visited by extraterrestrial. They're showing themselves more and more now. The other day they were everywhere, and they obviously, the narrative was, oh, just drones. But there were drones, but there were actual extraterrestrials as well. And it's becoming more and more like, you know, commonplace now. And these extraterrestrials in the Bible, the Quran, and, you know, even in the Bible, they're telling you about crafts. Ezekiel's will, Crystal City in Book of Revelations, Daniel's visions, Enoch being taken up, Jesus being taken up. Even in the Quran, they tell you that Muhammad was taken up. They say it was taken up on something called a burak, which is like a little donkey, which the way they're interpreting the information using a primitive mindset.
Yeah. But they had no exposure
exactly.
to
so now it's being exposed. So yeah, there are different extraterrestrials. They're around. They've been here for millions of years. Some of them walking amongst us, looking just like me and you.
That's
They've had children.
To know about.
Yeah. In the caverns, you had like different species, like the original Shayuk, or what we call the like the Teros, the Deros, the Duanis, obviously the Flugerods. You had the Donakil.
These are all different species.
Different species. This is not even mentioning like the hybrids and the greys, to go back to your question, where they were created as scouts to go and check out an atmosphere to see if, the Earth was habitable. Can you breathe, on this planet? Like when we go to Mars or try and go to other planets like Europa and all of that, you have to send drones to make sure that the atmosphere is suitable for you to be able to survive on there. So some of these were like that, and then other beings like the reptilians, I didn't mention them, different species of reptilians, draconians, they would abduct these beings and create their own versions of them. So now there's so many different species. The ones that didn't have emotions are the ones that were like, like the mutilations with cows and things like that, where people will see crop circles. They will come, take these beings to, just like we take mice or rats and in the lab and cut them up and experiment with them, they were doing the same to humans. So some extraterrestrials will take people up, and it may not be a pleasant experience because they'll stick probes in them, try and experiment with them to see what makes you tick, what makes you behave the way you behave, like a lab rat, you know what I mean? And others are just friendly. They'll meet with you, talk and take you and show you things and say, look, warn your people because the path you're going down, it may, wipe off humanity. So different extraterrestrials have different agendas, different stakes on the planet. Some don't like humans, some do. Some want to coexist, others want to take over. There are all types of wars going on in the seas, in the skies. When you hear rumbling and it's not lightning, because the way lightning is formed, you look at sometimes when you see all these sparks and things going on in the skies and the heavens, wars are going on. And now on the planet, things are kind of hyping up with, the different wars are going on again on the planet. So there's a lot going on.
All right, so there's a lot. But salvation, like when I was a Christian, there was a lot of emphasis on, being saved from some inevitable judgment, or and I guess as we're talking about AI and the trajectory of where that's going, is what is salvation? What's the escape, or is it an escape?
There is. And this is, in fact, if I could just read a little bit from it, if you don't mind, I will answer the question. But with words, again, you have to look at the word salvation comes from Slavic, right, which deals with slavery. and being enslaved, and then but we're not. You're only enslaved if you want to be enslaved, meaning that your mind, you like religion, can keep you in a particular mental slavery where you're doing things and following things, and you feel it doesn't make sense, but you're enslaved by it. You could be enslaved by your job. You could be enslaved by anything. But to answer your question, I want to read, because it's funny. I was because I'm always reading, and I was reading this scroll called the Nine on my way here, and the number of this shop is 101, right? 101, and I just happened to read this on page 101. That's how I remembered it. To answer your question, it says, Nuwapians, you all have the truth, the way, the actual facts, and Wu-Sabat now, you all are blessed with it. Take it and teach it. Spread it to all peoples. Nuwapians, preach it. It is for all who will listen. Nuwapians, each of you all who know this truth must teach others. Right? It is your obligation to be helpers, revive the world, redeem the lost, the confused by way of Wu-Sabat, Nuwapians. Now, I'm going to read this little excerpt called The Meteorite, yeah? It says, Nuwapians, know that the day shall soon arrive when the big meteorite shall strike this planet. All will be shocked. Fear of the end of the world. That is not the end of the world, the whole world. Much destruction, much deaths and injuries, a day and days to follow. Because of it, people who were separated will join as one. The fears will have powers stronger than the separations and racism. Apophis, Abaddon, Apollyon, destruction will change the minds and the hearts of the people. And that's, you can read that in Revelation 9, verse 1 to 21. I read that to come to your question because the master teacher has been teaching us for many, many years, and the book that people look to for what they call the end of the world, or like you say, in terms of salvation, is the book of Revelation. And if you study that book properly, it tells you that one will be sent, right? It said, because remember the vision is from John. This is why John is one of the most trusted out of the four, Gospels, because he saw this vision and he received this. But that book of Revelation is the only book that is the book of Jesus, right? And Jesus said he sent it and signified it through his angel. Now, people are waiting for Jesus, but he says in that book, because that book, as I said, relates to what people are calling, the end of the world and redemption and, being saved. And that angel is Malachi. Okay? The word Malachi means my angel. That's what it literally says in that book. Even when you read the books of the Old Testament, the last book called the books of Malachi, in that book it tells you what's going to happen at the end of the world, which is, remember, when we say world, we don't mean everywhere, right? But a change, or the end of a new world and the beginning of a new. If you read Malachi chapter 4, verse 2, it tells you about the Son of Righteousness coming with healing in its wings. And this is where the angel Michael is Malachi, or Melchizedek, or Malachi Zodok. This is who Parnabab Yaanuwn is, or Yaanuwn, that I started off telling you about. He's that angel that has come to bring about this new cycle where those who listen and put into practice what he's teaching will be saved or receive salvation. And that's like what I just read, anybody who would listen. And to get salvation, you have to then learn about Wu-Sabat and put it into practice by what the teachings are. Not because I say so. When you study and read it for yourself, it will transform you from inside out.
And what is putting it into practice? What does that look like?
Like, okay, first of all, let's just say all the questions you've asked, right? Or anybody will ask. Who is God? Where is God? What should I do? How shall I pray? What shall I eat? What shall I do? Who shall I call on? Any question you can think of, the answer is given to you. So then once you know, because it says the truth shall what? Make you free. It's misquoted as set you free by the people who have you in bondage. Because by you accepting that you're in bondage, that's the only way you need to be set free. But you set yourself free, or you make yourself free by putting in the practices of the word, the truth, yeah? The truth is synonymous with facts. So for example, if a devil is teaching you to eat the wrong things to put into your body that's going to make you sick and ill, then if I come along and I teach you, no, that's bad, eat this instead, and you put that into practice, then you're going to be better off. Just like saved, in the Bible. I guess, yeah. Like in the word save or safe is actually another funny word, because, you know, people say a savior, right? And they attribute that only to Jesus, because the original word is Yeshua, which means savior. So anyone can come and save you. Because if you were like in the jungle and you were lost and I came and rescued you, I would be your savior in that incident. So again, all these words like Messiah, anointed, savior, people make them like exclusive to just one person. But no, it's like when we say a Christ consciousness, this is where we're saying like from the year 2000, a new cycle began. It's called the sun cycle. And this is referred to as the Aquarian age, and a new change is happening where those on the planet who are raising their consciousness, their vibration, by doing the right things. And, you know, it doesn't matter who you are on the planet, if you're doing those things and you're raising your vibration, learning the truth, putting the truth into practice, that's how you get in your salvation. And the truth comes by way of Wu-Sabat. Not saying that truth is not in other things, but a lot of the other things have been desecrated or messed up, and you have to sift through to get the truth from it. So for example, in the Bible, there is truth, but it's like 5 or 10%. The rest of 90% is not truth. The same with the Quran. So if you took the truths from the Bible and the Quran and, you know, all the writings that have ever been, going all the way back to the ancient tablets, that would be Wu-Sabat, because Wu-Sabat is pure truth. And that's why nothing can stand against it, because truth is truth. You don't have to like me, you don't have to like it. Whether you like it or not like it, whether you do it or don't do it, it's still gonna be the truth, you know. But I can't tell you that. You have to find that out for yourself by putting it into practice. And you will know, because when you compare it to anything else, it's a clear winner. And that's what he did. He came on, and because he was specifically bred and chosen to come and do this job, there's nothing anyone can do. And like I said, the worst people can do is say it's not true, call your names, say whatever they want to say. But if you compare it to what they're saying or what they're doing, it very easily, it stands way above everyone, because you're dealing with an extraterrestrial that is of a higher intelligence, and he's making you into one. That's the whole beauty, because
into an extraterrestrial?
No, into a supreme being.
Oh, into a supreme being.
Yeah.
And is that what Jesus would have?
All the teachers, the masters, like what you're calling Jesus, he was a part of these, what you call 24 elders. Okay. That's what I'm saying. The 24 elders are made up of these masters that came to the planet, and they taught, and they were teaching the same thing. But when they left, men stepped in, desecrated it, took over it, started to, lead people astray. And but in the intergalactical community, he is known as Sanenda, and these are beings, that's what I'm saying, these are entities that were seeded, but you have, with each one, there's a disagreeable one as well. Like in the Bible, like we point out, people talk about Jesus like he's one person, but there are 3 different people that their stories rolled into one called Jesus. Okay. Because the real one is known as Yeshua. Then he had a son, because he was married to Mary Magdalene. That's a whole different video.
Yeah,
And they had
watch
children,
this.
and one of his sons was Bar Jesus, Simon Bar Jesus,
yeah.
because the word Bar from Hebrew is son. So you're literally saying Simon, son of Jesus. Then you had Mark Antony and Cleopatra, who had a son known as Cleophas. He was also looked at as a Jesus type, you see. That's just in that. If you go into Islam, you have Muhammad, and then you had Muslimat, who was a fake one. Every time there is a golden child, there's a fire child who is the opposite or tried to confuse people. This is why people are confused on the planet, because you will have an agreeable, but to confuse you, they will have a disagreeable. And so, like I'm saying, like now their craft, they will tell you they're drones. There always has to be something to keep the confusion, because the chaos and the confusion is what the disagreeable want. They feed off of that energy, and they have people working in their favor. So people are in church and in mosques, and they're doing the devil's work and not realizing it. And until like yourself or other people I've spoken to, one day they wake up and like, this is not making sense. This is not adding up. This is not adding up. And then they pull away. And others are just there, just following the crowds. You also have disagreeable beings that are faking it. You know, we have black devils, all yellow devils, green, all types of people are devils, and you have the ones who are doing the right thing. So it's not as simple as I belong to this club. That's what religion does. If you're a Christian, oh, we're saved, we're going to heaven, and everybody else is going to hell. And then you start to dissect it, and it's like, you have a million different denominations, you know, just in Christianity alone, like Catholic, Protestant, Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, and the list goes on, and more every day. You go into Islam, it's the same thing. You have, you know, Shia, Ahmadiyya, Ansar Allah, Nation of Islam, and they're all dividing and dividing and dividing. Then they fight against one another, kill each other because of religion, and you're like, but you all follow one person, who is Abraham, who is the patriarch of your religion. Why are you so divided? Because it's done on purpose. It's technology. The devil said he will make evil fair seeming. So they promote things that look good and cool, but yet they're really bad for you, you know. So everyone has to take responsibility for their soul and then find the truth. And we tell you we've got that truth, and anyone else can tell you the same, but you have to then match and put it together and look at which one makes sense for you, and make up your mind. You know?
So prior to Wu-Sabat, yeah, what, like, because that I don't know, from what I'm getting from what you're saying, started with Dr. Malachi Z.
No, it didn't. That's what I'm saying. It's like truth has always been here.
Absolutely.
Truth is truth.
So I guess what I'm saying is, what was it before?
Well, before he came along, people were following mainly monotheistic religions, because that's how if you wanted to know, you know, where do I come from? You know, how did everything start? You would be told by way of religion. You will be told that, you know, there's this God, depending on which culture you're in as well. Because this is the point, different cultures will tell you their story of the beginning.
Right.
And like you said, the Dogons will tell you, oh, these beings came from Sirius. And you go to the Sumerians, they'll tell you, oh, yeah, you know, it's Anunnaki. Go to ancient Egypt, they tell you it's the Natharu who came, and they come from Orion and Sirius. That's why the pyramids of Giza, they line up with the belt of Orion. They tell you where they come from. You go to different cultures, the Hindus will tell you these beings came from, you know, like Nirvana, and, you know, different stories of creation. But it's just that in the last 6,000 years, you've just been told and given the Bible and the Quran. And the New Testament is only 2,000 years old, and they would like you to believe that, put away all these great civilizations and cultures and people with, you know, language and all kinds of creativity, and just follow this one thing, which is only 2,000 years ago. So that's what I'm saying, that prior to the truth arriving, people were just following different things. But it's always been written by all the ancient cultures that this time will come around, especially if you're someone who, as an ontologist, you've been around for millions and millions of years. You've seen it happen, you've seen the cycles, and now there's a new cycle. So you're able to go, we're coming into, you can map it literally, like when we're going to move into this new cycle we're in now.
So why now that we kind of get to a point where it's like, okay, let me explain, let me make sense of it all, because prior to, Wu-Sabat, as you said, there's so many different cultures that and religions that have elements of truth.
Yeah, but it's because of the cycle. That's what I'm saying, that every 24,000 years, it's a new cycle.
Right.
So and that cycle came about by the year 2000 AD, you see. And then from then, the new cycle started.
Is that according to our calendar, the Gregorian
calendar?
Right.
Yeah, but that's another point, because to know what date you're really in, because that's a confusion again. That's why the Mayans, they had their own calendar, and they said that the world was going to end in 2012. And there was a movie called 2012 as well.
Yeah.
And the reason they stopped there, because the dimensional shift took place in 2012. We have actually got a book on it. So we've got books on everything that I'm talking about. Yeah. So, but that was the start, because from the year 2000, you're going to start to see this change happening, which is going into like the year 2030. And a lot of changes are taking place on the planet. A lot of, like you said, the truth will be known. And the reality is, every book speaks about this time. Even the Bible talks about it. As I said, the book of Revelations, it says, when the truth comes, all false things shall perish. And now everybody will know the truth. So it is time for truth. There's nothing that's going to be left unturned. Like anything you've ever wanted to know about, it's now available for you to know. But you have to want to know. But a lot of people are still in ignorance. They just want to believe that, what they've read in the book, and that, Jesus is going to come out of the sky one day and save them, which is not true. And you have different people on the planet still waiting for things that have already taken place or happened. And some things are yet to happen. But if they don't know about them and they don't align themselves, then they're going to, not everybody's going to be ready at the same time, because these cycles keep coming and going. And unfortunately, I read about that meteorite, right? This is another thing that over the years, everything that the master teacher has told us is going to happen, has happened. Not one thing he has said that's going to happen hasn't happened. For people who have been walking beside him, because he doesn't want anyone to walk in front of him or behind him. He says, we're all one. I'm an extraterrestrial that have been designed to come and teach you, to take you from ignorance into, knowing. That's what happened in Genesis, when the serpent told Adam and Eve that if they eat the fruit of, that was forbidden for them, they're going to know good from evil. Because remember, they were walking around, they saw the tree, they saw the serpent to speak to them, especially Eve, and he asked her, did God say that when you eat that fruit, you're going to die? And when you read the quote in the language, it says, die this day. Right. Not you're going to die eventually, as people try to interpret it. Right. And when they ate, they didn't die. So that being told them the truth. And he said, you will know the truth, not believe, because belief is what religion tells you to do. Just believe me, believe me.
So the serpent told the truth?
Yeah, and it wasn't a serpent.
Right.
Because it wasn't a snake. And that's mistranslation again, because in the quote, the word they're using for serpent is whisperer. That became kanas in Arabic, yeah? The whisperer, because this person was whispering and telling her secrets that God didn't want her to know. And when, he was right. And that serpent is the same being from ancient Egypt known as Ningij-Zida. But that's a whole other different story. There's so much information.
So this story is, I mean, I can only take it like, I guess, metaphorically, or
No, it's not.
No,
It
it's
was a real
literal?
story. It's a literal story.
So
but in the
serpent
Bible, you're
literally-
right. There's metaphorical, they're like allegorical, and they're actual real incidents, and they all get mixed up, and then people are confused because they don't know which one is real from which one is true. Or which
Yeah, but I
one
mean,
is...
it's hard to take that literally, that a serpent spoke.
Yeah, exactly.
That a man came out the dust and a woman came out of his rib. Like,
Right.
it's very fantastical.
Yeah, and this is what we're saying, that when you start to think like a god using science, it doesn't make sense. Because like you say, a snake doesn't have a larynx, it can't speak. And can you imagine a woman seeing a snake coming up to her to talk? Honestly, what would a woman do?
Even if the snake
Even man
didn't
will
speak,
run.
Yeah, just,
You know what I mean?
the
It's
snake,
like-
period.
Yeah, so we know that they take in stories that are taken from ancient stories and ancient tablets, misinterpreting them,
Yeah.
because they don't know the...
But there is, I guess where I'm at is that I can't take them literally
You
at this
can't,
point.
yeah.
But I do see there's a value, esoteric, like some kind of meaning to
Behind
the
it.
story.
Yes,
And I'm trying to
exactly.
work out, okay, what is it getting at? Rather than actually reading it and taking it literally. Which,
Yeah, but there are people who do.
yes, no,
Like
I
how
did for a
people
long
believe
time.
like Father Christmas is real.
Yeah.
But that's what you have to do.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
studying takes that spell away, because the spell is making you think things that you can't. It's like, how does that make sense? Like, how is it possible for Noah to take 2 of every animal from across the world into an ark in the desert?
Yeah.
But there's some species that only grow, or, you know what I mean, in parts of the world. So if he's on the other side of the world, how did he get those into the ark?
Yeah.
So there are lots
Like
of stories.
penguins.
Yeah.
Penguins would have come from the North Pole, I guess.
Exactly.
And travelled all the way
Yeah.
over.
But when you know the facts behind it, all that was a genetic experiment where he was taking DNA of different species in a laboratory. You see what I mean? This is what I'm saying, that when you know the actual facts behind what becomes, like you say, like a literal story, it's like, that doesn't make sense. But the real story will make sense. Just like it wasn't a talking snake, it was a person that was speaking to her and whispering to her and telling her things. That became translated as serpent, when the word is a whisperer, because the person was whispering to her. And we can go from the cover of the Old Testament all the way to the book of Revelation and break down everything. And then once you've done that, you outgrow those books, because you realize that these are just, as I said, plagiarized from the ancient tablets. Now, when you get to the, let's say, the Sumerian text now, you get completely different accounts of the stories that have been copied over. And then you go beyond that to ancient Egypt, you get, a different story. And you can then see how the Osiris, Isis, and Horus story in Sumeria becomes the Thotmuse, Ashtar or Ishtar, and their son Tammuz. And then you see some of those words are actually left untranslated when they come over to the English, which then becomes, as I said, your, God. And then they leave out the woman as well.
Father, Son, and Spirit.
Yeah, but yeah, everybody comes from a woman. And they're telling you that woman was taken out of the rib of a man. But then the question you would ask as a thinking person is, if you're a man or a person, you have a navel, right? A belly button.
Belly button, yeah.
Did Adam have a belly button?
Well, he wasn't. But if he didn't come out of a woman, then he wouldn't have had that umbilical cord, I guess.
Right, but he was. That's what we're saying, because every woman gives birth to women and men.
Of course.
When you start going into
Well,
science,
yeah, there's
X and Y chromosomes.
yeah,
It's like those are like nursery stories for children.
Yeah.
But you have to graduate from that. You know what I mean? That's why they say Bible is basic information before you leave Earth. And you have to start to think, oh, am I going to leave Earth? Yes, you are. As a spirit, as a soul. And where do that go? Where does that go? And what happens when you get there?
That's a great question.
You see? And this is all the things we break down, because for years it will be mystified. And he breaks it all down, because he's a being that has mastered both realms. That's how you become a 720-degree being, because a circle represents completion, 360 degrees of physical information, or what we call the seen information, and then you have another 360 degrees of unseen information, which people will call spirit, or the spiritual realm. You add the two together, you get 720 degrees, which is completion of both the seen world and the unseen world. But you need a master to teach you about that world, because he's mastered both of them. And then we go into the different realms of, then we go into 9 ether. We literally have scratched the surface, but we've covered a lot of information. But the 9 ether is like the highest you can get to in terms of your development as an etheric being, which is, when you're not in this skin suit, because you can develop as a being as you go all the way, because you're not just a physical body, you're spirit, you've got a plasmatic, your soul, you're a mental being, and you're an etheric being. So these are parts of you that religion won't really teach you about. They will just teach you about your physical body, and then they mix spirit and soul together because they don't know the difference. But there is a clear difference between a spirit and a soul. You see, and these are the things that people have to start getting into so they can learn about their true being, who they really are.
All right, so another question then is, I guess reincarnation, or the idea of being here prior to this existence and maybe being here again after this existence. But like, I remember looking at the infinity sign, the 8 kind of sign. Yeah. And I always used to look at infinity and eternity as like no end, life with no end. But then, started to realize that it's no beginning and no end. Infinity is no beginning and no end, and it's a crazy concept to get my mind around.
That's from the religious concept. They will tell you there's a beginning and an end. Yes. The Alpha and Omega, innit? That's what they say, and then they say that's Jesus when it's not, and that is really referring to this being known as Melchizedek again, which is the same being.
Alpha and Omega.
Yeah, referred to as Tahuti, because they tell you he had no mother or father, no beginning of days. But what you said about the infinity sign, when you see the 8, if you raveled it round, you literally see a circle.
Right.
So it's a circle, right? With circles, that's why I gave you the 360 degrees of the unseen and the seen world. You can have circles within circles within circles within circles. So time is not linear. It's not starting here and going in one direction as they try to bind your mind with the clock going tick-tock, tick-tock like that, right? But it is cycles, like I said at the beginning. So you do have many cycles to perfect your being, to elevate and graduate to the next level. So in terms of what you're calling reincarnation, not the way it's taught in religion, where they're saying like Jesus rose from the dead, and Lazarus was raised from the dead. That's not true. In that sense, like you don't.
But even if he was, he died eventually anyways. So.
Right, but the point is, when you say reincarnation, the word Khan or Khan is like dealing with cardinal, like coming back in the same body. You can't, because your physical body decomposes when you die, right? Because, or we don't use the word die because we know that energy cannot be destroyed. Yeah, it recycles. So you have in Wu-Sabat, as taught to us by Dr. York, Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, you have like up to 24,000 cycles to perfect yourself in this lower realm. Because like I was saying, you have different realms, right? And this is the lowest realm, where you come here to master this realm, to basically burn out certain desires, the things that keep you bound to this, So once you burn those out, you can move on to the next stage of existence. Because when you were saying at the beginning about God creating, in the religious world, everything starts from creation. But when you research what the word creation means, it means to grow, right? Or to form something. So yes, Enki was growing or creating, but there's existence before there is creation. And this is again something that when you're bound by religion, you can't see it. But you existed as an energy or as an etheric being before you slow down your vibration to come here into the physical realm. Like you've been born into this world, you're born back into the other world when you get rid of the skin suit. But that being that's been born into the other world has to be mature. Like babies that are born into this world and you're termed premature because you haven't developed enough. So some babies may not make it if their parents were like, I don't know, taking drugs or doing certain things. And when the baby's born premature, they have to put them into an incubator and make sure that they, you know, look after them so that they grow to be able to survive. Your spirit being is the same. When you're being born into the other world, if you haven't been healthily and grown and balanced to be born into that world, then you will not make it and you come back. Yeah, so your whole point of being here is to master and, you know, the material or the physical plane.
It sounds like to me that like we are being prepared or training to live in an environment of perfection.
Yeah, that's right. Eventually, that's what we go back to, perfection. And we come here when, like, it tells you in the Bible, like, beings rebelled and they were cast down here. You know, like you had the 200 fallen angels, and then, you know, a lot of beings came, and then they've been multiplying. And then, you know, you have us as well who have forgotten or lost who we really are. So, you know, it's about sifting amongst the beings to find those children of the Natharu, those that want to, they know, they feel it. Most people are, I've had enough of this place. I'm not from here. I want to go back. I don't want to come back. I want to go to heaven. You know, people use those terms. And it's real, but it's just misinterpreted in the way that it's taught by way of religion, because they didn't have the facts or the, you know, the pristine information regarding these topics. So now when you're in Wu-Sabat, you start to learn about, you know, you may have been here before. On average, most people have been here 9,000 times as taught to us by our master teacher. And then you have new souls or beings that have only come here for the first time, you see, and different beings are at different levels in their development. You know, and some will go and not come back, some will keep coming back until they...
How do you look into that? How do you gain insight into if you've perhaps, you know, been here how many times? And so I guess so you can understand your purpose.
The whole point of Wu-Sabat is, I mean, what I've given you, again, we're just scratching the surface of a lot of information where we will have a specific book that will deal with a subject like the spiritual you after the physical you dies. That's a title, which goes into what we're talking about. You know, we have another one called the 24 Elders, where, you know, you see where, you know, even like these negative confessions that we're talking about come from. So the true information is there, and a lot of people have got it watered down over the years through the different schools or the different teachings, and they don't have the pure information. Whereas now, you can know exactly what it is that you're supposed to know so that you can prepare. Because when you're getting born on the other side, your ancestors are there waiting for you. This is who you need to connect with and call on to help you in this physical world, because you're connected to them by way of epigenetics and or something called quantum entanglement. Because that's what I'm saying, like we can be literally here all day because you're actually connected to them by blood and DNA and by vibration and frequencies. So everything turns into vibration when you really break it down, because you're dealing with movement. And when you say motion, you say energy in motion becomes your emotions. This is how you feel things. And so by way of your genetics, your emotions, your bloodline, your ancestors, they're on the other side where you're going to, some of them. Some are agreeable and some are disagreeable. Some are there to hinder you because they've been pulled down here because they haven't made it, and they want to experience the physical world because they're still attached to it. And then you have the agreeable ones that don't want to, and they're trying to pull you up. So you got two sides all the time. Those that want you to make it, that are waiting for you, so they will help you when you get to that realm, and then you continue your journey in existence and continue till you go to, as you say, perfection, which we call being one with the all, or Pa'ut, the all expanding. But you have to know and understand these different states, these different beings on the different realms, how they relate to you. So the more you learn about yourself, who you really are, the more you're going to know about why you're here and what you need to do, and you know, and so on and so forth. But it's a lot of information, and it's a work in progress as well. You know, you don't get overwhelmed, don't start panicking and, you know what I mean, like beating yourself up. You're like a child when you're being born again, literally, but being born again in truth, where anything you want to know, any question you have, the answers are there. And that's why this being is here on this planet right now. And everyone has the opportunity, but not everyone's going to be ready in this cycle, because just like flowers, everyone doesn't bloom at the same time. Some people are ready now to make this journey, this transitions. Others are not. They may have to wait for another cycle, another 24,000 years. But you don't want to miss this time, because this, what we've got here, is not going to happen again. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity.
What do you mean? Sorry,
meaning that, again, I can read from here. He says, if I can find it, I'm not sure how much time we got left, but let me see if I can read something to you. He literally says in here, he says, we'll never have this opportunity again. There's a quote, but meaning that this happens every 24,000 years, right? So it's actually we happen to be living in the time period where this is taking place, because remember, many people have passed on and they didn't make it to this time, you know. So yeah, but basically that's what it means. I mean, we're kind of running out of time, but he literally says here that he says that, you know, this is only going to be...
There's an opportunity coming. This is every 24,000 years. You say that?
Yeah, but I can't find it right now. But yeah, we'll post it. We have a group as well, a Telegram group where people can join and ask us questions. We have a series called Ask Us Anything, you know, and
I appreciate that, man. I really do. Earlier on you said that, you know, truth can withstand scrutiny. You know?
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that made me kind of suspicious almost, really, of what I was involved in prior, because the more questions I asked, it's like there was a resistance. You know, and a like almost offense, and I was seen as being disrespectful or offensive for asking these questions.
And you know, the thing with that is, because I was in the same position, because they say things like you're blaspheming and you know, you can't ask those types of questions. And what I used to ask myself is, if God doesn't want me to ask these questions, why is he putting the thought in my head?
Straight.
Why is he making me think of these questions?
Straight.
Because they tell you he knows everything and he's almighty, all powerful. So how can he know everything yet can't answer my questions? The problem is the people that you're talking to, they have been used to being put on a pedestal. You know, like the preachers, the imams, the rabbis, the pastors, whatever, like, and they don't know the answer. And rather than say, I don't know.
It's quite simple,
They would try and, you know, because of the ego, the pride, the jealousy, these are the 9 mental diseases. They will just make you look like you're the problem, you know, like you need Jesus, or, you know what I mean, you're a troublemaker and you're a heathen, you're this, you're that. They just start calling you names. And all you're like, just answer my question. And if you can't, just say, I don't know, you know. But yeah, so that's what happens. People then get victimized in the churches and the mosques or whatever, because, you know, the people up front, not everyone, of course. There's some that are sincere and they don't really know and know what they're doing. They're like puppets or minions being utilized to do the work of, you know what I mean? But yeah, you should be allowed to ask questions, because it does say seek knowledge from cradle to grave, right?
Absolutely.
So,
and all you're getting, get understanding.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, unless you have any other questions, we can leave it there.
That's enough for today,
we're
man.
always here, and you know, we have 1,000 books that cover all that we teach, and that's from one man, 1,000 books.
That's crazy.
You know, so, and it covers every subject and everything in detail that you could ever want to know, and he's been bestowed with that power. It's not him, it's this being, this extraterrestrial that has been sent, known as Yaanuwn, to come and bring about this change that everybody's been waiting for and asking for. But of course, people are afraid of the unknown as well. Some people are scared of change. You know, they've been doing something for so long.
Yeah.
They believe something's, you know, they're scared because they're told if you don't follow this, you're going to hell.
Yeah.
Which is another thing, like, why would a loving, caring being create a place to torture people forever?
Yeah, I mean, fear is a big part of what keeps, you know, religion going.
That's right, because you, from a child, you're trained to think, if you don't follow what we do and say and do what we do in this club, you're going to be burnt in fire in hell forever and ever. And anyone who's ever been burnt by fire, that the thought of that alone makes you think, well, I don't want to. But then you think, how is this fire able to burn you and you never disintegrate? If you're going to be burnt forever and ever and ever, it's like, if I take fire to this, it's going to burn, right? It's going to disappear. So how are you able to burn forever? Again, that's a misinterpretation. What that is dealing with is you burning out your desires, you see? So hell is what you make it. It's a place in olden times being misinterpreted called Hades, or it's a state of mind with you giving yourself hell based on your desires for the physical world, the lusting and the things that you have to burn out so that you don't lust for them anymore, you see? So, like I said, all these little, you know, intricacies of things that they teach you, but they don't explain them very well, leaves people kind of confused and lost and scared and, you know, afraid of leaving that club they're in, because everyone in the club, it's like, if if sheep are going in that direction, and we call them now sheeple, they're going in one direction, but they don't know what's at the end of the journey, where there's a slaughterhouse and everyone's just going and getting slaughtered. And when one sheep finds out that, you know, there's a slaughterhouse at the end of this journey, and they start going in that direction, it's like, you look crazy because you are going in the wrong direction to where everybody else is going. And the majority is not always right, you know, and that's the thing. It's like people think where there's a massive crowd or many people that they're doing the right thing. No, you can all be doing the wrong thing. And, you know, truth is truth. And you're going to be that one person that goes, I'm going to head in that direction. And it may be crazy at first because you got all these people telling you you're wrong and you're going in the wrong direction and you're going to go to hell. And but then, you know, as you stick it, as you learn, you become stronger and stronger in your being, and you can deal with anybody and anything, because what they have can't stand against the truth, you know. And that's the day and time where all falseness and false things will perish or will be exposed, and only truth is going to stand triumphant, you know. So yeah, you've asked me some good questions.
Yeah, it's a lot more another time, man.
Still,
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate it, bro.
No, man, anytime.
Yeah, 100.
Until the next time, man.
No doubt.
Take it easy.
No doubt.
Peace.